It's time for rock and roll, which is relatively unpopular in Leeway. But let's talk about the musician who performs rock and roll there with the blazing riff, that being Xinyan. So let's begin. Xinyan is a playable pyro character in Genshin Impact. Rock and roll is a relatively unpopular style of music in Leeway, having recently been brought over from Fontaine. Xinyan, however, loves the sound, and she's slowly but surely amassing a fan base of her own as she performs throughout Leeway Harbor. Xinyan is a female character in Genshin Impact. Her weapon is a claymore, and her vision is Pyro. Her birthday is October 16th, and her constellation is Fila Ignium. Her nation is Leeway, and she has an affiliation with the Red Strings. Her special dish is Rocking Riffin' Chicken, which is a variant of Julian Chili Chicken. She became a playable character on December 1st, 2020. The rock and roll stars of Xinyan in the floor localizations of Genshin Impact are Laura Stahl in English, Wan Yashin in Chinese, Takahashi Chiaki in Japanese, and Kim Chai-ha in Korean. Xinyan only has two titles, which is Blazing Rift and Leeway's Soul Rock and Roll Musician. Xinyan has dark skin, amber eyes, and dark brown hair, which she wears pulled back into two buns with spiked bands. One lock at the front of her hair has a dark red streak, and in her buns and underside of some locks are bright orange. Xinyan wears a black-brown tank top fastened by knots and white shorts, with a red and white vest with flared red, black, and white sleeves. She has a black and red ribbon tied around her right leg and a netted stock on her left. Xinyan typically carries a white, brown, and red square ruan with a axe-like bottom. Her outfit, Ardent Soul, is described to be a rocker's stage costume adorned with spikes. Xinyan is a fan of rock and roll and returned to Leeway to spread it across the nation. Despite having difficulty in improving its reputation for many reasons, she is not discouraged and continues to play, appreciating all who come to her performances. She does not have any formal training for her music, having learned it herself on the go. As such, she is very supportive of others who show interest, even if they have no experience. Her pyro vision gives her a fiery personality. She likes standing out in her own way, but many consider her to be weird or terrifying as a result. While aware of this, her attempts to make herself more presentable to them ends up in failure. Dance on Fire is Xinyan's normal attack. The normal attack performs up to 4 constructive strikes, while the charge attack drains stamina over time to perform continuous spinning attacks against all nearby opponents. At the end of the sequence, performed a more powerful slash. In the plummeting attack, punches from midair to strike the ground below, damaging opponents along the path and dealing AoE damage upon impact. Sweeping Fervor is Xinyan's elemental skill. Xinyan brandishes her instrument, dealing pyro damage on nearby opponents, forming a shield made out of her audience passions. The shield damage absorption scales based on Xinyan's DEF and on the number of opponents hit. Hitting 0 to 1 opponent gains shield level number 1, a lip. Hitting 2 opponents gains shield level 2, laid in. Hitting 3 or more opponents gains shield level 3, Brave. which will also deal intermittent power damage to nearby opponents. The shield has a flowing special properties. When unleashed, it infuses Xinyan with pyro, and it has 250% damage absorption effectiveness against pyro damage. Rough Revolution is Xinyan's elemental burst. Strumming rapidly, Xinyan launches nearby opponents and deals physical damage to them, hyping up the crowd. The sheer insanity of the atmosphere will cause explosions that deal pyro damage to nearby opponents. The show goes on even without an audience. Is Xinyan's first ascension passive skill. It decreases the number of opponents when Sweeping Favor must hit the trigger each level of shielding. Shield level 2 laden requirement reduces to 1 opponent hit. Shield level 3 Rave requirement reduces to 2 opponents hit or more. Now that's rock and roll. Is Xinyan's fourth ascension passive skill. The character shielded by Sweeping Favor deals 15% increased physical damage. A red recipe is Xinyan's utility passive skill. When a perfect cooking is achieved on a DEF boosting dish, Xinyan has a 12% chance to obtain double the product. Rock and roll originates in Fontaine and is just starting to find its feet in the Liyue Harbor, where Xinyan is pioneering the art. Every night she strings on her self-built instrument, steps onto her self-constructed stage, and plays her self-composed songs to a crowd of enthusiastic supporters. Her music reflects her personality, bold and defiant, loud and proud. She is no virtuoso, but doesn't bother her decided fans on one bit as they let loose and enjoy the show, singing their hearts out in shaking out of the stress of the day life. In the heat of the moment, the fire that leaps from Xinyan's vision seems ready to turn night into day. She is a rare rock and roll talent and a master performer who really knows how to create an atmosphere, says a review on one of her live shows in the Steambird. Living in Liyue is expensive, especially when you want to enjoy their finer things in life. But as Xinyan would say to those tied down by worldly worries, if you know how to rock, then it's easier to roll. Xinyan does not adhere to traditional performance norms at all. Anything can be used as her instrument. The pillars on stage, the floorboards, the cheers and yells of the audience, and even the explosions and sparks created by her vision are valid brushes with which she paints her performance. The impromptu stage often starts to burn somewhere after the halfway mark of the performance, till all that's left is a smoking pile of charcoal. After many warnings, the Melif were finally forced to tighten their patrols and try to find ways to stop Xinyan from staging her performances. The subsequent battles of wits tended to turn out into Xinyan's favor. She was often able to find a place to perform, set up a stage with frightening speed, and begin to a raucous night with her audience. The more reliable word on the street is that many patrolling Melif are themselves affected by the spirit of rock and roll, becoming her loyal fans in the process. Xinyan would get wind of the Melif's latest patrol plans from these friends of rock, and was thus able to avoid their eyes with ease. Eventually tiring of the lack of results, and in the absence of any evidence that anyone was harmed during Xinyan's performances, the Melif came to adapt a one eye open, one eye shut approach to her actions. Xinyan is tall, has a sharp gaze, and always wears her stage costume in public to keep herself in the right mood for her music. In the eyes of bystanders, this makes her quite the imposing sight as she walks down the street and many assume she means trouble. When she lines up to buy a snack, people in front of her in the queue will panic and move well out of her way. If she happens to lock eyes with young children, even a brief moment, they will run crying to their parents, even when she has done nothing at all. Xinyan is often suspected of wrongdoing, purely because her fierce appearance makes her look like some sort of hinderous villain in the eyes of some people. Xinyan didn't care at all that much about how other people saw her, but she did think that it wasn't good thing to scare others and make trouble for them. If she could at all help it, thus she constantly looked at her for ways to make a change. Every day when she woke up in the morning, she would look at herself in the mirror and massage her face with a finger to stretch and relax her eyes a little. She would even practice smiling and study expressions, verbal and facial alike, of great elegance. After a significant amount of patience, she once came across a group of children bullying another child, and insignificantly she went over to rescue the bullied child. She gave the kid what she thought was a friendly smile and a gentle pat on the head, to say that the upset child quiet down after this would not be incorrect. However, the reality of the matter was that the child was standing there frozen in fear and unlearned, double down in their pants. As for the would-be bullies, they screamed and fled in a panic. "Run, run! The angry lady turned into a monster! She's gonna eat us all!" "Hey, I ain't gonna eat y'all! And I ain't no monster either!" But to no avail. The moment she raised her voice, all her hard work was undone. Xinyan has one standard by which she judges all things. Is it or is it rock and roll? All that is just an upright, standing up for those who have been wronged, taking on challenges is rock and roll, and all that is reprehensible, fearing the wicked, opposing the kind, dirty tricks, scheming ways is not rock and roll. Rock is the spirit of rebellion and resistance, yes, but potentially immoral acts are nothing less not rock and roll. Xinyan reserves the right to make these judgments, and whenever these judgments are based on the result of or her mood, the difference between the things covered by these two opposite terms is clear. The only catch is that these standards sound odd in certain contexts. Due to her fierce appearance, Jiran nearly has no friends, with Zhangling of Wangming Restaurant being one of few expectations with whom she can speak more freely. Jian has a special reason for coming to Wangming Restaurant for musical inspiration. Whenever Zhangling is rehearsing new recipes, others may run for the hills, but not Jian. She initially eats all the experimental products and admits to the taste bud explosion that results from the never-before-seen flavors. Inspiration flows into her mind. Tell you what, Zhangling, that dish rocked. Though Jian considers this to be the highest pleasure, Zhangling finds it a little hard to be happy about such ratings. The internal subject of rock and roll is resistance. But the thing that Jian resists is not to a concrete thing, but rather the conceptual shackles of prejudice. She was born into a poor family, and her parents placed a great shock in her, giving her the best of what little had in the hopes that she would be able to rise to become a phoenix. Of course, this phoenix would have to be something they would recognize, but things don't always turn out as planned. Jian grew to be taller than most girls, and her looks were far from anything that might be considered cute. Nor was she any good at any of the feminine arts. whether it was cooking, chores, needlework. So since her childhood was so deeply impacted by such prejudices, Xinyan understands how terrifying they could be, yet becoming a rock and roll star has not caused her to give up on these other arts. This is not only because she hates losing, but because she feels that giving up because you have no talent is itself a prejudiced belief. Not long ago, a fan of Xianyan's named Yu Jin was invited to her place as a guest. But if Xinyan hadn't opened the door herself, young Jin would have thought that she had the wrong house. The house was spark and spun, the windows were clean, and the home ordinance were homemade and immersively arranged. The cooktop was still moist, indicating that someone had been cooking not long before, and there was half-stirred cloth by the bedside that looked much like a decorations Xinyan wore during the performances. Why this was particular the room of the refined lady of reputable upbringing was nearly any spirit of rock and roll to be found. Xinyan was quite worried that this fan of hers would find the difference between the impression of rock and roll and this reality too jarring. Unexpectedly, Yojin support and fandom would only grow more intense after this. The way Xinyan sees it, many adults fail to realize the potential because they are tied down to prejudice. Giving to fear and endless anxiety, they do not understand what life is about or where they are going. She wrote these thoughts into her songs, but invited scorn from the very same adults. What does this brat know? Even so, Xinyan did not waver. After all, such mockery was born of the prejudice towards her age. If prejudice were something so easily overthrown, there would be no value in resisting it, would there? She believes that rock and roll is like a speed. After every performance, some speed might sprout within the hearts of those adults who listen. When they wake up the next day, perhaps they might receive some inspiration, or perhaps a change of mood will come over them. Even if it only changes their thinking a little bit, perhaps they might find that the real-life troubles they are facing are nothing but a storm in a teacup. Of course, few people other than her audience and the friends of rock would credit this to rock and roll. But people do nothing less. Say this around the tables after tea. Well, having a girl who plays rock and roll is pretty interesting, no? Xian's instrument is a handmade lyre of a very unique design. She based it off the rock and roll instruments that were imported from Fontaine before adding additional modifications based on her personal understandings. For example, she mounted a crescent-shaped axe blade on the tail end of the instrument, so it serves much as a weapon in the pitch. She also connected it to her vision, allowing it to spew flames and sparks. Initials can also spray flames, all the better for it to self-destruct if it falls into the wrong hands, preventing it to be misused. The list of modifications goes on, and they are too numerous to count. The instrument is thus unique, and the sound it provides is so special. Sorry, what? What do you mean? These modifications sound like they have nothing to do with music. Sounds like you two need to attend one of her performances. You'll understand then. Xinyan was someone who never fit in Liyue Harbor, and she only found where she belonged when she encountered rock and roll. But because she lived in a land that had no place for rock and roll yet, she needed to be able to attract enough attention. She immersed herself in the world of music, looking for a way to move people's hearts. She broke to any instrument and played till calluses formed on both hands, but still it was unsatisfactory. Who would want to listen to this racket? The Rotten Tomato reviews is reserved were starting to get to her. She wondered if she should quit. Sitting on the top of Mount Xinyan, she looked down over Liyue Harbor, but drew the lights lit the streets and alleyways of the harbor. They could not light the flame of the spirit of rock and roll. She considered leaving to go someplace where rock and roll was appreciated. But would this not be the running away? Would it be a betrayal of rock and roll spirit of residents? No, she would not leave. She would become a flame that could light Liyue Harbor up. She started experimenting with the use of fire to move people, adding sparks and explosions to her music. But this will only mean fleet for the ordinary person. Who knows how many times she must have burnt her fingers or blown her instrument up. But still, she continued to practice every day on top of Mount Xinyan. And perhaps it was the gods themselves had granted expectations of this new form of music that would soon grace the Seven Nations. But regardless, the boiling hot vision would be the final stroke of perfection. Xinyan dashed down the mountain and began her very first rock and roll concert in Liyue. Thus did her musical journey begin, with showers of sparks and explosions keeping time. Her constellation, Philae Ignium, is the Latin word for strings of fire. The second character in Xinyan's Chinese name, Yan, is not used in her Japanese name. Instead, the Japanese name uses Hono instead, which is produced identically to Yan in Japanese, but has a different tone in Chinese. The expectation is only exhibited by Xinyan. All other Liyue characters are written with the same Chinese characters kanji in Japanese. This may be because the Chinese character Yan is not the one of Japanese Juyu kanji list. Fact 1. Xinyan is known by these aliases or titles. Xinyan with a D in the middle of Xing and Yan. Fact number 2. Xinyan shares her English voice actress Laura Stahl with Barbara. Fact number 3. Xinyan's instrument is modified Chinese Ruan. Fact number 4. Her level 6 constellation, Rocking in a Flame, is a reference to the Neil Young song Rocking in the Free World. Fact 5. During petal-lit ships fish for the moon, Paimon asks Xinyan why her guitar has blades on it. While Beidou refers to it as an axe, the word axe is a common term for guitars, particularly electric guitars. Fact 6. Xinyan knows how to do woodwork. And that is Xinyan. Next time we'll talk about Yang Fei. So see you next time.